Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Blind Spot. A great episode. I love what they did with this episode because they make it seem like, so basically there's this, some refugees. One in particular, his name is Alkos, and he has his siblings, and he's a part of this whole like program, and there's this guy named Saya, who's going to help them with getting them a job and set up in New York in particular. But Roman shows up and is like, nope, don't do that. You don't want to do that. Because the fact of the matter is this is a setup and everything. And he gave them a journalist's name, and that journalist's name was Megan, the same Megan that Reed is dating. And so this turns into the whole situation of initially she wasn't going to pay attention to the phone call, but then Reed kind of started looking into it. It's because he knew that particular area that they're from, that they're connected to, dealt with a tattoo and everything, which is interesting too, because it turns out Megan actually knows about the tattoo. She doesn't know about the tattoos, but she's slightly familiar with he's working on some case with some tattoos, but she doesn't know the intricate details. So, which even then Reed's kind of you really shouldn't even know that. So I'm sure he can get in trouble for that. But nevertheless, this is actually our first time ever really getting to know who Megan is. Finding out the fact is that she is a journalist. We kind of get a little bit of her personality when it turns out people are trying to kill Alkos and his siblings. And the first thing she goes, she lets them know, I need a lawyer and everything. It's wait, what? We're trying to talk to them and trying to help them, and you're suggesting them get a lawyer. It's they don't know anything. They don't know anything about the U.S. laws and everything. And she basically didn't want the FBI to kind of push them around and manipulate them. They're not here under normal circumstances and everything. So it might be, she didn't want them to be taken advantage of, which is one side of you're I get it. It's actually a good thing because it shows that you're very caring, that you care about this whole situation. But there's the other side of it. It kind of makes it seem like you don't think Reeve is kind of a good guy and that he would kind of take advantage of. But I guess it's that situation where police, if they need information, they'll do whatever they need to get the information they need. So it's not saying Reed is a bad guy, but the fact of the matter is be put in that situation of information he needs, he might, apply more pressure than he normally would or something like that is her mentality. But still, it also seemed like there might be something more to Megan too, because at the end she's kind of worried about. She's my editor wants to put it on the front page, and then Reed is kind of oh, don't worry, no one, we're worrying about this too much. No one knows. So it's maybe she's hiding from something. Maybe she has a very past where it's she's hiding from something, and putting her name out there would kind of complicate things or something like that. Maybe she's in hiding, or I don't know what her whole scenario is. Whatever it is, it's it seemed like that might be what it is for Reed. In his particular case, because whatever it is, he knows about it, but that's what I'm interpreting that as. What other reason would she kind of clam up like that? That's all. It's kind of interesting. Another interesting thing too is it pops up in this episode, and he's yeah, I love her, and Tasha's whoa, you said the L word. This is behind her back, but maybe he said it to her already, but nevertheless. And he's well, yeah, she's well, you've never really said that. I've never heard you really say that before. And he's well, we're living together and everything, so of course I would. Which immediately my brain goes, so either you're saying that just because it's wait, are you only saying that because you're living together? You feel you should feel that way, or is that actually how you feel? But you're it's compounded by the fact that we live together and everything, and I care so much for her, so obviously I love her. I don't know how to interpret it. I kind of personally interpret that as the first way, because I feel if you just went, oh yeah, of course I do, but it's no, we live together, so it almost seems you feel obligated. It's because you live together that you're trying to put this benchmark on your relationship. Well, it's because we're living together, I have to say I love you. It's almost you kind of rush into this relationship a little bit, I think. I don't know whether this whether it's because of the whole him and Zapata situation, the team being broken up, he just needed somebody there for him. Maybe that's what that is. I don't know. But what you couldn't help but notice was that look on Tasha's face, oh, you almost see that sad look on her face, which is, obviously, but the episode last week kind of put in a perspective of well, Tasha's gonna have to choose a side, and it seemed like she made it clear cut, oh, I've got your side, 100%. She's chosen the CIA, but it's that's gonna be complicated when obviously this season is kind of hinted at, no, there's still something there. She has feelings for Reed, and Reed potentially still has feelings for her, so. That's definitely, you can tell that they're planting the seeds for that to turn into a much bigger thing later on. I personally want him with Tasha just because it's like, well, they obviously like each other. It's just complicated situation of them going down two different paths after Jane and Kurt left and everything. So that just kind of put them in that position that they're in right now. But nevertheless, it's kind of interesting because it seemed like from the beginning, like this Saya situation, kind of going back to the main plot, it seemed like it's like, oh, what is the reason for him doing this? Well, it seems like the reason he did it is because it's connected to Crawford, because basically that whole like place that Alcos and his siblings are from, because basically they commit crimes and they have these particular like refugees take the fall as the ones behind it. He was going to do that to Alcos and his siblings, and then he was also going to do it to another 3 refugees later on in the episode when things kind of fell apart with Alcos. So, but it all goes back to Crawford, because basically he would have profited in some shape or form. And going back to why Roman was even interested, it's like, it's not him just trying to be a good guy. The fact of the matter is he is trying to hurt Crawford's bottom line, in particular because it seems like this is connected to Victor. It was Victor in particular who set that whole thing up. So I guess the point is also, like, whereas Victor, like I brought up last episode, which kind of gets confirmed this episode, is like Victor wants to make things harder on Roman, because it's like, oh, this is my job. You're kind of the golden boy coming in. I'm trying to put you back in your place, make Hank see you for the failure that you are, blah, 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 blah. So maybe Roman's kind of doing that on his own end too. It's like, oh, I'm helping, like, once again, getting Victor knocked out of the way, making a lot of his, like, things fail, so that basically ultimately makes Hank fail. And so eventually getting him out of the way so he can get closer to Hank. And then eventually, like I said, in my opinion, topple Hank and basically take over his whole operation. That's what I feel like the lone goal is, but we still don't 100% know. I feel like that Victor thing this episode kind of showed that that might be the case, but with the whole like trying to take over Hank thing, Hank's operation, we still don't know yet. Like, and even then, Hank might not even be the top of the board. Like, Hank might be a player amongst a bigger group of players, kind of like a cabal type of situation. Might be something like that too. We'll just have to wait and see. But I mean, since I went and brought him up, Roman didn't want to go to this relief event that Blake was handling in her dad's stay, but Roman kind of didn't want to go, and then she's like, oh, what's up? And then Victor's kind of like, oh, he's got, PTSD, and it kind of shocked Blake and everything, because it's like, oh, you didn't tell me. It's like, I had to hear from someone else that you have it. And obviously she was upset, because it's like, okay, you're not telling me the truth and everything. It's like, well, we were at that gala before and you had no problem. It's like, well, because you were there and you kind of made me a lot easier. Plus I had to get all my friends' money away just because that guilt drove me to the point, like, I got to give it away. So, and eventually saying the L word himself, saying that he loves Blake, which just kind of makes that situation even harder, because it's like every time he says something, anytime the relationship grows, it's like, he's secretly stabbing the dagger in her back a little bit deeper and twisting it a little bit harder. To me, I immediately interpret that as Roman's trying not to go to such a big event where there's a lot of big wigs and a lot of pictures taken, because if there's a lot of people, like probably like in a smaller event like the gala, like because he wasn't there expressly with Blake since he was on his own, he could probably dodge and kind of stay behind the scenes so he doesn't get caught on too many cameras and his face plastered everywhere. Well, he'll be there with Blake as her date, so people running up to her, talking to her, people spending a lot of money, so she'll be taking pictures with them and probably going to have Roman in those pictures too. So he probably did that expressly for the purpose of not wanting to put his face out there too much. Victor complicated things by saying like, oh yeah, you must have PTSD, and he kind of painted Roman in a corner, so he kind of tried to stay there. But we did learn a little bit more about Victor too, is the fact is Victor's more like a son to Hank. It's like, oh yeah, we've known each other for a while, Blake and him, and it's like, he kind of rose through the ranks and everything, which kind of points to him kind of being the golden boy and everything, especially with this whole Crawford situation. And it seems very interesting too, because it's like, Blake is very blunt with how she approached Roman about the whole situation, because she's like, yeah, you might want to watch your back around Victor. He's very protective. Hence, makes me go back to the whole situation like, okay, so the whole Hank thing, like, him trying to screw Roman over with that whole coin situation, that was that just 100% about Hank, or was that specifically about Blake? Was it just so that, he gets removed from the situation on Hank's part too, and in fact gets removed from Blake's life? It's like, oh, so he's like a brother, and it's like, no, it seems like there might have been history there. Maybe there was some underlying feelings. It definitely seems like in the way she talks about it, like Victor might have a thing for Blake, or maybe it is just because he is super protective of her. Not necessarily in a brotherly way, more in like a unrequited love type of thing, but even Blake was kind of like, keep him close, or, maybe even keep him closer. If you can't be friends, the last thing you want is him as an enemy. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Roman's kind of like, oh, thanks for the warning. But Victor is kind of bluntly being like, especially when Roman's kind of like, yeah, I know you tried to screw me with that job. You even had people, they try to have people have me killed. It's like, well, the fact of the matter is, if you wanted the job done, you should have done it yourself. It's like, so basically watch your back, and Victor's kind of like, oh, watch your back. It seems like he is running Roman's prince at the end of the episode too, which is like, cause he's very suspicious. I was like, oh, I gotta find out who Tom really is, because he even brought it up. It's like, oh yeah, it's so super lucky that you were there when, Blake ended up getting mugged. It's like, quite a coincidence. So it's like, he kind of sees through a lot of that stuff. So, not necessarily a person you want to keep so close, but I guess because he's such a dangerous person, you do want him that close. So it's just kind of an interesting thing what they're setting up with all of that. But kind of, like I said, tying back into what I was saying earlier, like I said, it does seem like that is Roman's plan to kind of take things down piece by piece. I guess the reason why he knew, I guess that also shows you how much he knows about their whole situation. Is for him to know to go to Megan. He know that Megan would lead to the task force, like to Jane and her team, which is like, well, he did have like a year or so to come up with this plan. So he shows you that he, like I said, it's interesting because, like, so far, like I said, Roman's the only one. He's got probably his network and connections, but he's still doing all this by himself. So he did his homework. But then that also begs my question. My question kind of pops up in my head. It's like, well, what if Megan's not as like innocent in this whole situation? What if she's kind of a plant by Roman too? Because we learn a lot of things in this episode too. In particular, because initially Kurt's still trying to make things better with Jane, but no headway. Which Jane's like, I love him and everything. She will always love Kurt, but she doesn't know she can forgive him, And even Tasha was like, so does that mean you're going to run away? She's like, no, I'm not going to run away. No matter what the situation is between her and Kurt, she's not going to run away. And Tasha's like, good, because he's not the only one that would miss you. I'm like, oh, that's so adorable. Because it's always so interesting, because it's like, when you look at season 1 and you look at season 2, it's like, the two people who probably had the biggest problem with Jane are probably like, in particular, Tasha, like at one point in time, like, I think wasn't it last season, she had like the biggest issue with Jane, and it's like, look at them now, and it's like, it's so adorable. It's like, especially, I always reference it, like in season 1, especially at the beginning, Reed did not like nor trust Jane, and it's like, look where they are now, They've grown into this family, and I just thought that was amazing. Also, side note, Patterson knows about the whole situation. I wasn't 100% sure she knew, but it's just because she was trying to avoid, like in this episode in particular, she might not have known, like, after everything was all said and done last episode, but definitely this episode, she knew. She was just trying not to talk about it. She was just trying to ignore the tension and stuff like that, because she didn't want to get in the middle of it, so. But Kurt was like, hey, could you track down something of Avery, maybe a picture, so that Jane can see her face and at least, give her some closure, which Patterson's like, don't be an idiot, because that's just going to make things worse, because all that's not going to bring her closure. It's just going to make it worse, and it's just going to make Jane kind of hate you a little bit more. Just give her space, give her time. That's all you can do, because Kurt just wants to fix everything. It's something that came up earlier in the season, and I guess that was kind of foreshadowing. It's just because when the whole situation came up before, Kurt was like, I want to do something, I want to fix it, and it's just like, well, this is a situation you can't fix, and now we understand, like, well, what he meant by that, back then, and what that represents now, so. But I kind of go ahead and skip to it a little bit. It's the whole situation around Avery. It's so interesting, because Patterson looks into it, and it seems like Avery was hired by Roman, so the whole thing was a setup. The question is she really Jane's daughter, or is there is she a grifter? Cause it's like, oh, he had asked her, why did you come looking for Jane now of all times? It's like, was there truth to what she said, or was she just like randomly on her own? Roman tracked her down and was like, hey, do this. I'll pay you for it. Like, she never really cared, but she went along with it because she was getting paid to. Maybe even like the whole being shot thing. Maybe she really did get shot by Kurt, and that ended up like she ended up getting revitalized. But the fact of the matter is her eyes were wide open and Kurt checked for a pulse and everything. That's why I was kind of like, she can't, like, I was like wondering about that. I was like, it seemed like she was dead. So you're telling me, like I said, not listed just a situation of because he was in the heat of the moment. But now it's like, well, no, maybe she was hired specifically because, like, once again, she went out of her way to go in there, even though Kurt told her to. Maybe that's just her being stubborn. But when he shot, it was a man's shadow that first popped up. And so maybe that was Roman then doing that. So Kurt never actually shot her. He didn't shoot anybody, but, like, you know, they set it up and made her stop breathing and everything. So this might have been a whole setup, and then Roman got her locked up for whatever reason. Maybe she eventually got caught because she was off grifting somewhere else and got thrown into prison. Or maybe Roman set her up to get thrown into a prison just to kind of remove her from the board. I feel if that was the case, Roman would have killed her just to remove her from the board. So maybe it's something she got caught on her own. Hence that whole, like, her being in Germany, we saw last episode, kind of trying to escape from like a prison or something like that. I don't know. So maybe she's really Jane's daughter, but she's also a grifter, or maybe she's just purely a grifter that has no connection. Like, but it definitely does seem like Roman set that whole situation up just so that he could eventually have leverage over Kurt in this whole situation to get things done, which I still don't think Roman knows that Kurt told Jane. And even if he probably was kind of hoping either way, whether Kurt doesn't tell her and he ends up being further more and more of a pawn for Roman, or if he does tell Jane, is going to break up their happy marriage and stuff like that, which is also what he wants too. So it's kind of a win-win scenario for him. So I'm definitely interested, probably more so than anything, about that aspect. And then there's also the other aspect we're seeing throughout the episode is Glenn. We get introduced to Glenn in this episode, who Jane had asked a little while back. She had left him a message about looking into Avery, which he kind of did, but he came to New York because he wanted to meet up with Jane, and it's like, hey, let's look for her together. But it seems like they kind of have a little bit of a torrent affair when she was on the run. It doesn't seem like he knows everything. Like, she eventually told him about, like, her and Kurt. He didn't really go into too many details, but it's like, oh, a man that she loves, and she didn't want to ruin that. So it's like they had their thing, but it's kind of like I guess the best comparison is like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas type of situation. Like this, because there's a little bit of flirting between him and everything. Him very in particular. It's like, oh, you're such a charming SOB, aren't you? And also the fact is that he was, yeah, you're flirting too. You're just kind of being all like subtle about it. We also saw like her connection to Dwyer. This is most likely their first time meeting, so getting screwed over by him in this particular case. Both of them, because it's like, oh, we'll split the money, and then Dwyer's like, no, I'm not about split my money. And the fact is, you wanted to split my money, you can be removed from the situation too. So I wonder if that whole situation will come back in some shape or form, because that guy in particular, they gave him a name. I mean, maybe, and we never saw his face, but so maybe he's supposed to just be a nobody, but they went like, yeah, Larry kind of finds himself in this type of situation more often than you'd kind of really think. So I don't know. The fact is, at the end, like when Jane was going to somewhere in that hotel, I was like, yeah, she's going to see Glenn. It's not Kurt. I figured as much. She's like, I don't know why I'm here. It's like, doesn't matter why. Just, come on inside. So it's like, the fact of the matter is, her and Kurt are no longer in a good place. So that means something most likely might happen between them, which at the same time with the whole situation coming out about Avery makes me go, who's to say Glenn isn't a plant too? You can't trust anything in this situation, because it's like, this show builds the greatest amount of distrust, because you never know who to trust. There have been so many betrayers, there have been so many moles and plants. It's like, who's to say that Glenn isn't one too? That this isn't just further playing into Roman's hand, because this brings a bigger separation between Jane and Kurt, one that's already there, because there's already something between her and Glenn, but now the fact is there's nothing between her and Kurt, even though there is something, but it's complicated because of, oh, you killed my daughter situation. So, but we will just have to wait to the next episode to see where all of this is heading. Like I said, a great episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good